this video we're going to show how to animate in Photoshop. Much like stop animation, where there are a number of frames that get stitched together, here we'll have a number of frames, or JPEGs, that get stitched together using Photoshop's animation tool. In this example, we're going to stitch together or animate some text. So the first thing we'll do is go to File, New, and create a new canvas similar to the size we've used for other things we've done, 1920 by 1280 with a resolution of 150, which will just make this final animation a little easier to share on a horizontal screen. I'll click OK, and I like to zoom out to see my entire canvas. I'm going to use my type tool to write hello in all capitals, and I'll click my move tool to settle. Then I'll hit Command T to free transform, hold my Shift key to transform proportionally, and make it nice and big. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this, as you can see, as a text layer now, identified by this T here, the type T. I'm going to change this to a graphic by rasterizing it. So I'm going to go up to Layer and choose Rasterize Type. And what you're going to see happen down at the T is it disappear, and you can kind of see the hello letters there. This is no longer a text layer, and Photoshop won't treat it as such. So if we wanted to change the font, for instance, we won't be able to do that. But what we will be able to do are things like this. We'll be able to individually change the colors of letters. Oops. I'm going to just kind of change the letter colors here, as Photoshop will recognize this type now as a graphic. Okay. The next thing to do will be to save. I'm going to go up here and go to File, Save As. I'm going to save this as animation text, but instead of writing the word animation, I'm just going to call this Annie text. And this is going to be the primary file that we work with. We are going to save this as a Photoshop file, so I'm going to call this Annie text master, because this is the master file that we're working with. I'm going to click on my desktop and save it there. I'm going to call this again Annie text master, making sure the format is a Photoshop file, and I'll save it to my desktop, and you can see it right here. Also on my desktop, at this a good opportunity to do, I'm going to make a folder and call that Annie, short for animation text, and I'll call this frames. So this is where I'll store the JPEG animations, or the individual JPEGs, excuse me, that we hope or want to animate. Here's my master, here's just the folder. The next thing we'll do is we get our selection tool, so we can select each letter and make a copy of it. We're going to copy each letter so that we can then move it around in order to begin making the frames for the final animation. So I'm going to go to my selection tools and choose the polygonal lasso tool, which is a lasso tool that will select areas with straight lines. And I'm going to start by highlighting the H. And remember, with this particular selection tool, I need to bring it back to where I started, and I'll know that I have a correct selection because I'll get the dancing ants that tell me that it's been highlighted correctly. If I were to want to deselect that because I made an improper selection, I would hit Command D. For instance, imagine that I highlighted this, and when I went across the H, I accidentally missed part of the corner. I might want to deselect that, or I would want to deselect that so that I could select it correctly. I would hit Command D, which would deselect it, and I can get started again. Let's say my mouse got bumped and I got a bad selection in, or I started off to getting a bad selection and I haven't even finished the selection yet. I just want to start over. I can hit the Escape key, which is the upper leftmost key, to eliminate that selection or the beginning of the selection and start from scratch. Okay, but now we know how to do that. We know how to correct a poor selection. We're going to select these letters one by one and make a copy of them. So I'm going to select the H, and notice I don't need to be overly neat about it. I can go around the edges. Once I have it selected, I'm going to hit Command J, and you'll notice a new layer has been formed. I'm just going to label that layer H, because that's the H. I'm going to go down and click on the primary hello layer again, and I will select the E. Once it's selected, I'll hit Command J to copy that layer, and I'll double click on the layer and name that E. Go down to the hello layer, highlight the first L, Command J to copy it, and I will call that, oops, a little too slow on the click there, I'll call that L1 because that's my first L. Go back down to the primary hello layer, I'll select the second L, Command J, and I'll call that L2. And lastly, down to my primary hello layer, select the O, Command J to copy it, and I'll double click on that and label it O. What you'll notice now is if I turn my primary layer off and I begin to turn these letters off, you can see I have individual layers with each letter on them. Next, I'm going to turn my primary hello level off, and I'm going to begin to create frames where the letters of this word hello are just moved slightly. And I'm not going to be too particular about where I move them, but I'm just going to move them small amounts and slightly to create a hello that looks a little different on each what will end up being a frame. So I'll click on the H, I'll go to my move tool, and I'm just going to move it a little bit. Move my E, move my L, my second L, and my O. I'm just moving them slightly. Now I'm going to take a command or a composite snapshot using the command button. So a command or a composite, once I move these letters, I'm going to take a composite snapshot. A composite snapshot is just taking a picture of all these letters now in their new position. So in order to take a composite snapshot, which is basically going to create a layer that looks like what we see on the screen, I'm going to hit Command, Shift, Option E, and you'll notice a new layer has appeared down here. So I'm going to call this Hello Frame 1. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to just move my letters again. So that's my first frame of my animation that will look like the letters as you see them now. I'm now going to begin to make my second frame. I'll go and move my H, my E, L number 1, L number 2, and my O. Now move this frame down, this hello frame out of the way for organization, and I'll take a composite snapshot again. So this will be a composite snapshot that will create a new layer that will be my frame 2. So to create a composite snapshot, I hit Command Shift Option E, and you'll see it. It shows up right here, and I'll call this Hello Frame 2. And for organization, I'll drag this down here, and I'll turn it off and begin to make my third frame. I'll do that by going to my H, my E, and I'm just moving them kind of randomly. L, L, O. Time for a command. Shift, Option E, a composite snapshot, where I'll label this Hello Frame 3. And for organization, I'll move that down. Make sure to turn it off. Go back up to the H and move the H again, the E, the L, the L, the O. Time for a composite snapshot. Command Shift Option E. There you see it. Label that Hello Frame 4. I'm going to do 5 frames, which would be a minimum amount of frames you'd want to do for an animation. The more frames, obviously, the more animated something's going to be, the more movement of whatever it is you're going to get. So let's make a 5th frame. Again on my H, L and the oops, the O. Composite snapshot, Command Shift Option E, and this is my hello frame 5. Okay, so you can see that I have a number of layers in this particular file. I'm just going to go to File and Save, so I have this master file with all these different layers in it. So the next step now will be to save each of these frames as a frame JPEG, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save each frame as its own individual JPEG. So I'm going to turn off all the letters. And you'll notice if I turn frame 1 on, frame 2, frame 3, 4, and 5, you can see all the letters are a little different based upon how I move them. Okay, so I'm on hello frame 1. That's the only eyeball that's on right now other than my background. I'm going to go to File, Save As. I'm going to save this in the folder on the desktop that we made earlier called Annie-Text Frames. I'm just going to call this Annie-Text Frame 1, and I'm going to make it a JPEG image, not a Photoshop image. So I have the hello frame 1 on, that's my composite snapshot, and I'm going to save this as Annie-Text Frame 1 as a JPEG in that folder we created. Always maximize the image options and click OK. And to double check it, there it is, right? There it is, okay. Go back into this master file, turn off frame 1, turn on hello frame 2, I'm going to go to File, Save As. I'll call this Annie-Text Frame 2, and I guess I'll capitalize it like I have the other. And make sure it's a JPEG, and save it. Turn off frame 2, turn on frame 3, File, Save As. Going into the Annie-Text Frame folder. Now if I click on this, I can just change to 3. It's a JPEG, oops, JPEG, and save it. And you'll look in here, you'll see they're all saving in here. Let's save 4 and 5. Turn off 3, turn on 4, File, Save As, into that folder. Make sure the file type is correct, JPEG. And the 5th frame. File, Save As. 5. And even though we have JPEG here, we have to make sure this format is correct. And there we have it. So we've moved these letters together 5 times. We've made composite snapshots of them. We've then turned on and off the composite snapshots and saved each one as its own individual file, JPEG file, in the folder out here. So in order to animate it, we're going to go up to File, Scripts. We're going to load files into Stack. And I'm going to choose Folder and Browse into the desktop and get those Annie frames. And there they all are. Now, what's important here is that we just have the JPEGs that we want to animate. If this file were to be this master file in this folder, sometimes that can cause a problem. So we just want to make sure that the files that we want to animate are the only files in here. And this step is just necessary in order to animate in Photoshop. So I'm going to click OK, and you'll notice it thinking through things, and you now see all these frames over on the side. The next, I'm going to go to Window, Animation, and you'll notice I have one over here. I'm going to click on this hamburger and go to Make Frames from Layers. So I loaded these files into the stack. I'm going to go to Window. I went to Window Animation to do that. Now I'm going to go over here and go to Make Frames from Layers. And now you'll notice All the layers are here. They've been loaded. Sometimes you'll get extras. You just want to delete them. So the next thing I'll do is I'll hold my Shift key and select them all in order to set the duration. Now, you could set the duration individually, and I'll set it to 0.1 seconds, or we could select them all by holding the Shift key and just do it once, and I'll set the delay to 0.1 seconds. Well, should have worked on these. Let's try this again. 0.1. Yeah, change those to 0.1. There we go. So down here, I want to set it to forever because I want this to loop or repeat. And I'm going to do a test by hitting play. And there we have our animated text. The last step is to save this file. We're going to go to File, Save for Web and Web Devices. And we're going to hit Save. And I'm going to call this Annie Text Hello. And you'll notice the file is a GIF, which is an animated file. And I'll make sure that goes to my desktop. Annie Text Hello GIF. I'll hit Save. As it compresses it, if we look out here on the desktop, here's this animated GIF. If I were to double click on it, nope, it just brings up the frames. If I click on it and hit the space bar, I'm able to see the animation play. And that's it. That's animating text in Photoshop, but these steps would be the steps you would use to animate anything in Photoshop CS4.